Courage often precipitates celebration. Fear usually does not. I'm Kaneshi Hart. I am the host of the Coach Up podcast. I am also a speaker. I speak on how we forge through fear. And that's what we're talking about today. How do we forge through fear? But specifically, courage precipitating celebration. So, courage is, some would say, the opposite of fear, right? So, it's fear is you're afraid. Courage means you are bold and you are forward and you are fearless. Some people use that as a word that goes along with it. And courage is what usually precipitates celebration. Why is this important? Why do we even talk about this? Because there are things that you want to celebrate. There are celebrations that you have in your life that you have planned that you want to do. But the only way that you're going to get there is by being courageous. It is by forging through the fear that holds us back. It is by pushing through when we aren't sure how something's going to turn out, which is fear. That we're not sure how it's going to turn out. That's fear. It is through forging through activities that you just don't feel like doing because you're tired or you're you're disappointed or you're discouraged. Many of those being based in fear. Courage is forging through those to do the work, to do the activity, to have the conversation, to take the action that is actually going to precipitate you celebrating what you actually wanted to get that you were afraid you weren't going to get previously. Courage is the thing that says, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take action, I'm going to move forward. And even though I may be afraid, even though I may be uncertain, even though I'm not sure how this is going to turn out, even though I am anticipating that there may be some tension going forward, I'm still going to do this thing. I'm going to have this conversation. I'm going to take this action because then I will be able to celebrate, one, that I did the thing, that I took the action, that I had the conversation, and two, I'm going to be able to celebrate because it's going to bring me the results that I want. Now, let me be clear. Sometimes we don't always get exactly the result we want when we want it. Most of the time we don't. But I want to just let you know, in these situations where you are forging through fear, where you're choosing to be courageous, you will absolutely eventually get the result that you're looking for. That is just the law of sow and harvest, reap and sow. You reap what you sow. What you put in, you will get out. It will produce. It will multiply. God is a God of multiplication. It will multiply. And so, or he will multiply it. It's in his will. But he has laws that say what you sow, you reap. So when you sow good things, you reap good things. When you sow bad things, you reap bad things. When you sow effort, you're going to reap a harvest. When you sow discontent, laziness, you will reap nothing, right? It's still evident that whatever you put forth, you will get back. And often more you will get back than what you gave. So how does this all talk about courage precipitates celebration? So let's talk about what courage looks like. So courage is, like I said, it is recognizing that I still may be afraid. It doesn't mean that there's an absence of fear. It doesn't mean that there's an absence of hesitation. It doesn't mean that there's an absence of disappointment, discouragement, uncertainty. It doesn't mean there's an absence of any of those. It is doing it in spite of, right? Or if you're not feeling those, great. It is doing it because you know that's what you need to do. You know that's where the direction that you need to go. And so courage starts with a couple of things. So, and it can come from a couple of different places, but courage starts with a decision. And I know this may seem simple, but yet and still we talk about these same concepts throughout humanity and mankind because we just don't get them. Or we get them in a moment and then we forget them in the next moment. We get them for this situation and then we don't apply it to the next situation. How many of you are guilty of that? I am guilty of that, right? That in this area of my life, I'm completely fearless. I am completely fine with moving forward and doing the things that I know I need to do. And in this area, I'm not. I will give you a great example. Great example. When it comes to the Coach Up podcast, which if you have not subscribed or followed, you need to do right now. You can go do that. You can do that on your phone while you're listening to this. But when I started the Coach Up podcast, one thing that I believe the Lord called me to do with the podcast is to elevate people and highlight people. And I enjoy talking to people and asking questions. I thoroughly enjoy sitting people down and saying, tell me about you. Tell me about what you do. Let me pull knowledge from you. Let me pull your perspective from you. Let me hear how you think about things. And there are ways that I can still get better in doing that, but I enjoy doing it. And I think I'm fairly decent at it, right? Again, lots of room for improvement. But I enjoy that. So therefore, for me, reaching out to ask people to be on my podcast was not a hard thing. And it's still not a hard thing. Why? Because I don't have the fear that people are going to say no. I'm highlighting you on a platform where you get exposure. Even as my podcast is new or as it's growing, and it may not be at 10,000 downloads yet, but it will get there, and then 10 times that, and then 10 times that. But even with a small audience starting off, you're still getting exposure. And because it's evergreen, when the podcast continues to grow and expand and God's favor just makes it humongous, then your content is still going to be there for people to hear. So to me, it's a benefit, right? That you're getting to be on a podcast. And so I looked at that as I'm very courageous with having conversations with people and inviting people to be on the podcast because I see it as a benefit to them. Flip, podcasts, still same thing. When it comes to asking people to support the podcast as in be a subscriber or a follower, asking people to support the podcast as in be an advertiser or a sponsor, I have to forge through fear on that. I get afraid. I don't do it as much as I should because there's a fear that, oh my goodness, who's going to want to sponsor a podcast that's so small? Or who do I even talk to? Or who are they going to tell me no? Or is my pitch just going to be really bad? And they're going to think I'm not professional. Like, there's so many fears, unfortunately, that I deal with that I am having to learn how to forge through, or not even learn how to, I'm having to work on being courageous to get through, that I can recognize that in one area of my life, completely courageous. In another area of my life that's equally important, not so much. So that's why I come back to say being courageous has to be a decision. It has to be a decision that we say, okay, I am making the choice that I am going to do X, Y, and Z, regardless of how I feel, regardless of what my thought process may be around the situation at the time. I am going to choose that I'm going to take this action. I am going to choose that I'm going to do this action. I'm going to choose that I am going to, in spite of how I feel or what the situation may look like, I am going to choose, make a decision that I am going to follow this plan. I am going to do this action regardless. And that is one way that you're courageous. That's one way that we step into being courageous. That's one way we act courageously. Because sometimes we have to act and then the feelings will follow. I don't know if you've heard that or not, but sometimes if you do the thing, then the feelings will follow. Oftentimes we want to feel a thing and then do it, or feel a thing and then we don't do it. But if we do a thing, feelings will often follow. And that's why I said courageousness precipitates celebration. Celebration is joyful, right? But action has to come before the joy, right? So courage is the action. Celebration is an action. It is a thing, but we're typically happy. We're typically joyful when we celebrate. And so that's action coming before the feeling. So one way that we choose to be courageous is to choose to be courageous, to make a decision, decide what you're going to do, and then stick to the decision. And then if you need to, so let me give you this. Sometimes it's very important to make sure, pay attention here, make sure that you detail out exactly what it is that you need to do. Because oftentimes what happens is We will make a decision, but we will not make a plan detail to go with that decision. And then when we get to the first step or even the second step of what needs to be done for that decision to produce results, then we get stuck. Then we get scared. Then we stop being courageous. So hear me, make sure you have a plan. So what does that look like? Okay, so the plan, we'll just say, for example, we'll use me for an example. So because if you're a coach, you go through this. You need to reach out to people, have conversations, whether you're reaching out to them in the DMs of social media, or you're reaching out to them via email, or you're actually picking up a phone call and calling people, companies, what have you. You are talking to people, you are having a conversation with people, because even if you're talking to people in the DMs, eventually I hope you're getting on a phone call, right? Maybe you're not, and there's sales that are made just through email or DM communication, but I hope at some point, often, you're physically having a verbal conversation with people. And so let's talk about what the detailed plan looks like, because that's what I need to do to grow my business. My podcast, the sponsors and the advertisers, and to grow that. And also because I want to, and I'm starting this accountability club, I'm also going to have to do the same thing, talk to people to invite them to be a part of that accountability club. So, let me take a moment to do a quick commercial break here. One, thank you for watching this video. If you have not subscribed or followed, please do that, because I am working this month of September 2024 to grow my YouTube channel, the Connection Collaboration Space, which supports the Coach Up podcast and my speaking of Forge Through Fear, from 0 to 10,000 subscribers. So if you have not subscribed and followed, and you are a coach or you're a business owner and you want to get to your first 6 figures, or you are an individual who knows that there are things that are holding your future hostage and part of it is fear, then I want you to subscribe and roll with me as we build this legacy of how we forge through fear and how we build 6-figure businesses in a year. Okay, so back to our regularly scheduled program. So in the plan detail that follows the decision, this is what I need. So I need to call individuals to offer my podcast as a place for them to advertise. Okay. Fear hits me at so many areas in this process, but first I make the decision. Number one, I make the decision. I need to call, in order for my podcast to grow, I have to call companies, business owners, and ask them to advertise on my podcast. So I'm choosing that I'm going to do that. But now I need the plan detail in order to make sure that I act on my decision, because that is going to bring the courage or allow me to be courageous in the midst of the fear that's going to come. So we'll make it simple. It's a 3-step plan. Probably more than that, but we'll be simple. So first and foremost, I have to source and get a list of the people that I'm going to reach out to. So I have to decide what is the criteria of the individuals that I want to approach to be advertisers on my business, on my podcast. So then the first detail of my plan is make a list of the companies that I want to approach to pitch my business to. And it may start even before that. It may be make a list of the attributes of who would be ideal advertisers for my company, right? Because my ideal avatar is a coach who is new to the coaching business, you're struggling in your coaching business, and you're frustrated. And you may not be new, you may have been in your coaching business for 2, 5, 10 years, but you're frustrated and you're struggling and you've not yet made 6 figures. Those coaches, male or female, are my ideal audience for my podcast. The question then is what companies, what businesses want to support you in growing your business that you need to know about? So those would be CRMs, because you need a CRM to be successful. Those may be individuals who provide business credit, because you may need funding to start your business, to grow your business. Very fair. Those may be coaching companies, because you may need to get certifications in your coaching business, right? You may not be certified yet, or you may want to grow your certification. So those would be companies that you want to hear from that would be beneficial to you. It may be website designers, because you need a website. It may be social media companies. You need social media management at some point. So there are a number of companies that could support your business that then could be my advertisers. And so I need to make a list of who that is, right? So who are those individuals? Step one of the plan detail. Step two, now that I know the general categories, now I need to find the companies. I need to find a list, and I need to make a list of names of companies that I'm going to reach out to. And I need to make a list of 100 or 200, or source that from any of the numerous websites, platforms that will provide me the ability to pull that information, right? So that's number two. Get the actual names. And then along with that, get the actual contact information. Hopefully it's going to be on the platform that I'm using, so I don't have to do all that work. But get the information so that now step two is done. Step three is, when am I going to reach out to these people? So plan detail number three is, I'm going to make the decision every Monday, every Wednesday, every Friday for 2 hours from the hours of 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Probably not good. That's lunchtime. From 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., I am going to reach out to these companies to ask them to hear about my podcast, to see if it would be a good fit for them to advertise to you. And for me to make sure that they're a good fit for me to bring to you as companies that I say, here, you should hear from them. Right? They have something to offer you. So that's are we on part four? Part four, yes, I think, or part three. You keep that. Let's recap. One, who do I need to advertise? Who do I need as advertisers? Based on you as my audience. Number two, getting a list of those companies. Great. So number three is, what's the schedule of when I'm actually going to reach out to them? Okay, there's still more that allows me to be courageous, because I don't get stuck in the fear that happens if I don't do these steps. So number four, the fourth step is that I am going to have a script prepared for what I'm going to say to these individuals when I reach out to them. Why is this important? Because fear comes when I think, okay, now I have to call these people, but I don't know what to say. Or what if they're going to say to me? Or what if they give me this objection? Or what if they don't answer the phone? Or they don't answer my email? What do I do? That's fear. How do we overcome that? We have a script. And you have a script for your email, for your messaging. You have a script for your phone call. You have a script for your DM. And you have these scripts laid out. So I'm going to make a script, and I'm going to make multiple scripts, not like 10, like 2, maybe 3. And it may just be one script, and it just varies slightly depending on if the medium is phone, or if it's DM, or if it's email. But I'm going to have that pre-prepared so that when I'm in that process, I don't allow fear to stop me from doing that action of actually sending the message, making the phone call. And then number 5, plan detail. There's got to be a tracking, measurement, and accountability. What do I mean by that? Meaning, I've decided that from 3 days a week, 2 hours each of those days, I'm going to reach out to advertisers. I'm going to reach out to people who could be sponsors for the podcast. But just spending time doing something does not net results. And it doesn't mean that we actually are going to move forward. There's got to be results and data that says, this is what happened, this is what I did, so that I can make adjustments going forward. So let's say the first time I do this, I reach out to, in the 2 hours, I get to reach out to 30 individuals, send emails to 30 individuals, or DM 30 individuals, or make phone calls to 30 individuals. And I track that. And so I know 2 hours netted 30 outreaches to individuals. Now, if it's a copy and paste for your email or your DM, should be more than that, right? But if it's a phone call, you got to wait for the phone to ring, you got to leave a message, make sure you have a script for leaving the message, all of that. So then I'm able to determine, okay, so that means I'm getting to 90 people a week, right? 3 times a week, 30 people each time. So I'm getting to 90 people a week. So now after the first week, I need to track how many people did I talk to? How many people responded, right? And you should do that every day. How many people did I set up a follow-up appointment with, right? Because now, then the next, as we continue those relationships, how many people did I actually close? And then I can determine after doing that activity for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, maybe 2 months of tracking that. Now I start to recognize for me, because everybody's going to be different, I start to recognize for every 240 phone calls that I make or 240 outreaches, I get one sponsor. So that means now I know that either it's going to take me 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 4 weeks approximately to get one sponsor, or if I stick with the 3 times a week, 2 hours a day, or I can up the amount of time that I am spending each week to shorten that time frame. So now instead of doing 90 outreaches a week, I'm going to end up doing 150, which means in 2 weeks, if I'm averaging one sponsor per every 240 people I talk to, I do 150 outreaches per week, which means I got to increase the amount of time that I'm spending in this activity. Then I can get one sponsor every 2 weeks, one advertiser. Those numbers provide reality. Fear is not reality. Courage is not even reality, right? Like they're both emotions. We utilize them both, we act on them both, but they're not real. They are part of our imagination, ultimately. But the action is real. And I shouldn't say that. Feelings are real, but they're not tangible and they can change. Data, data is factual, right? That's the difference. And so I can take this factual data and say, I can change my activity to get a different result. So that's why it's important to have that plan. So all of that is part of the plan that backs up the decision that allows us to be courageous. And then that courage is what precipitates celebration. Because how proud are you going to be that you did each of these steps? Because you can physically see yourself making progress when you do the steps of your plan. And that elicits joy, it elicits encouragement, it elicits celebration, and you can celebrate yourself on each one of those. And so that's why I say courage precipitates celebration. And now really quickly, I want to talk about the fears that can attack you at each one of these steps, right? And so we're being courageous. You're being courageous in what you're doing. And that is going to deliver celebration and joy. But it is in the face of the fear that you are forging through, that you're tackling, that you're battling through. But I want to talk about the fears that crop up at each one of these stages really quickly. So we're making a decision. That is our way of forging through fear. Making a decision to do something is part of the process of forging through fear. Now, how do I make that decision produce fruit? I have to have a detailed plan. So the very first thing we said in this detailed plan was, I'm going to decide who it is that I'm serving. What's a fear that comes up? Oh my goodness, if I limit myself, then I won't be able to serve everybody and I'm limiting my money and then I may not make as much money or I may not be as successful or I may be missing out on people who could be my client and it could grow. That's a fear. Mm-mm. There is a purpose for what you're doing. There are people that you're called to, and there is more than enough money in the niche of which you have been called to, that you are serving X, Y, and Z. Because I think about this, even as I talk to you as coaches, I think, and you're new or you're struggling as a coach, you're frustrated. And the frustration and the new can go together as well. But I think, well, there are 6 and 7 figure coaches. Why can't I serve them as well? Mm-mm. Because yes, they could pay for, whatever I'm offering, but there's tons and tons and tons of coaches who are new and struggling and frustrated. I'm going to be able to make great living from them as well. So don't have the fear of missing out. The fear of missing out will attack you. Build build deep instead of wide, and it will last longer. And deep is with the people that you are called to, not trying to serve everybody. But I just wanted to say that's a fear that's going to come. And you got to recognize it and say, nope, I'm going to recognize who I'm supposed to serve, and that's what I'm going to go with. Part two of the detailed plan was making a list of the companies, right? And so you may think, oh, okay, so I need to make a list of this company, or we're talking about me, right? I want to make this list of these companies, and I'm afraid to go after the really big companies. So let's say it's a CRM company that I'm focusing on, or CRM companies that I'm focusing on to bring to you as potential advertisers for the podcast. So I could say, I don't want to go after HubSpot because they're so big. I don't, I'm not sure if they'll listen to me. Or the fear may be, I so if my fear is I don't want to go after them because they're so big, the opposing fear could be I can't not go after them because they are so big. Fear can go either way. That's why it's really irrational, right? And so, no, just don't have the fear. The fear that's going to attack is I need to go after a specific company or a specific set of companies, or I can't go after a specific set of companies because I'm so small, or I can't go after the small companies. I have to go after the big ones because they're already spending advertising dollars and the little ones aren't going to want to hear me, or I may have to go to more of the little ones in order to get the amount of money that I could get from the big ones. Fear, again, it shows up in so many crazy ways. How do we forge through that fear? I decide. So I'm going to target companies, CRM companies I'm either going to target all of them. Okay, let's target all of them. That's some decision. Or I'm going to target those who are maybe, if I got a list of them, ranked, 10 through 20, or 10 through 100, or 50 through 100, or I'm going to target the top 50, what have you. But the fear of I can't talk to this particular company for this reason will attack. But the detailed plan helps with that. And so you can imagine, and I know you could articulate the other fears that come up at each one of the detailed steps. But having the detailed step and the plan to back the decision that is going to help you be courageous, that is what helps you forge through fear. So that's what I'm going to leave you with today. I want you, and you will probably hear me say this a lot, because the decisions that we make are the very first step to help us forge through the fear. And then we need the practical application of how we back up that decision to get through the fear. But when we want to be courageous, it begins with a decision. The other part is it can begin with feelings, right? Something can happen that so charges us that we say, I am going to do this. And inspiration is great. Typically, that's inspiration. Feelings inspire, right? But inspiration wanes. And so that's why when you are inspired and then you're feeling courageous, make a decision and then create a plan to make that decision fruitful, to bring that decision to life. So I'm going to leave you with that for today because we've talked long enough. But I want you to know that your courage precipitates your celebration. And I want you to give yourself permission and the ability and the opportunity to be courageous so that you can celebrate yourself, celebrate your future, celebrate the steps that you are taking that are getting you closer to making the future that you desire a reality, and that you are forging through fear so that you can have the future that you want. Again, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you as always for tuning in.